I used to work weekends at a rural gas station here in my home state of Nebraska. I work second shift every Saturday and Sunday, so 2 p.m. to around 9 p.m., and early one summer's afternoon, I set off to work with nothing but a few wispy clouds and a clear blue sky. Now call me sentimental, but I love driving around Nebraska. I don't think there's any place quite like it. You hit the highway from some small town and it's like the whole world stretches out in front of you for as far as the eye can see. There's an almost unbroken skyline, only occasionally interrupted by a windmill, a barn, or a cluster of trees. It can look pretty as a picture on a sunny day, and up until that point, May had brought only sunshine and showers. But as I drove along the highway that afternoon and looked off into the distance, I saw some really scary-looking storm clouds rolling in. The general rule is that most storm clouds look much scarier than they actually are, especially when there's that big wall of angry-looking clouds facing you down like something straight out of the Bible. But most of the time, you get a little rain, you get a little wind, and nothing much else to worry about. However, on this occasion, something told me it was going to be a bad one, and by the time I got to the gas station, the storm warnings were being sounded over by local radio stations. My coworker and I normally did a quick handover, but since we got the storm warnings, we both had a hell of a lot more work on our hands. We had to lock all the windows, then either secure all of our outdoor fixtures or drag them inside, and then we had to inspect the pumps and all that kind of stuff before shutting off the fuel completely. My coworker went off to fuel up the generator just in case we lost power, as I went off to assemble a bunch of flashlights and batteries. And we obviously can't use candles with it being a gas station, so it's a major priority. We already had our designated shelter lined up, the station's office, so after ensuring the first aid kit was fully stocked, we kept the radio tuned up and our ears wide open for weather alerts and other announcements. We figured people would stay home and we'd be in for a pretty turbulent but relatively lonely shift. But we were wrong. One by one, 3 cars rolled into the front over the course of about an hour, 2 driven by single people and the other containing a mom and her 2 young daughters. Wherever they'd been, the path home led directly through the storm, so instead of risking their lives, they came to us and begged for shelter. And we couldn't say no to them. We weren't exactly equipped to shelter that many people, especially not overnight, but there was just no turning them away under these circumstances. We let everybody help themselves to drinks and snacks if they were hungry, mainly to try and calm their nerves as the incoming storm got worse and worse. And boy, oh boy, did it get worse. We all stayed relatively calm until we heard the tornado sirens going off. I'm pretty sure all the grown-ups there had heard the sound before, but it scared the hell out of the younger woman's 2 daughters, who started screaming and crying and begging their mom to take them home. Then, when stuff started flying off of our roof, a piece of debris hit one of their cars, and the sound of the alarm made the kids cry even harder. The poor things just didn't understand what was happening. It only took a few more moments of stuff falling off of our roof before we knew that we had to find shelter in the station's office. There was just enough room to fit everyone, and thankfully, with the office shielding us from the sound of the sirens and the howling winds, the 2 little girls started to calm down a little. But when something flew across the parking lot and smashed through the big plate glass window, it made a sound like a freaking bomb exploding. And the sound scared the hell out of me and a coworker, and by that point, we were kind of expecting it. But the 2 little girls nearly lost their minds. They must have thought the whole building was coming down, and so did one of the single drivers, because as the girls started shrieking, she had some kind of panic attack and tried to run back to her car. Once we realized what she was trying to do, my coworker lunged at her, telling her how going outside meant absolute death, and she wouldn't listen. She tried to fight my coworker, screaming and flailing, and it took me and the other single driver to subdue her. The little girls were screeching so hard they could barely breathe, watching as she struggled a little more and then just burst into tears. Then and only then did she stop struggling, as she cried and told us over and over again that she was sorry. We rode out the storm together for the next few hours, and I remember how the thing that really united us and kept us from getting too frightened was the goal of keeping those two little girls from screaming themselves unconscious. I worked so hard at keeping them calm and reassuring them that we were all going to be just fine. But sometimes, when I think about it, I think we were all trying to reassure ourselves too, and talking to them little girls like we were was sort of projecting, I think. Eventually the sounds of the winds died down, and after about an hour or so, it looked like it was safe for everyone to make a move. We walked into the store to find it absolutely trashed, and so much stuff had blown in that it was impossible to determine what exactly had smashed the window and made that explosion sound. Glass, snacks, magazines, and debris were just everywhere, and we had to tread very carefully over it all to keep from falling on the carpet of shards. The folks thanked us before they got into their cars, especially the young mom, who thanked the other two drivers for helping keep her daughters calm when she too was almost losing her mind. After that, everyone except me and my coworker went their separate ways, leaving me and him like, what in the hell did we just go through?
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Have you ever experienced the feeling of drifting off to sleep on public transportation, only to awaken several stops beyond your intended destination? It's happened to me multiple times, but this one incident I had a few months ago has imprinted itself in my mind. My boss overworks me to the point where I feel like I work in a factory, not a company. By the time I finish work, my body and mind are so exhausted that I frequently find myself nodding off, whether it be a bus or a subway. I never imagined being in a dangerous situation until one evening. Oh, Portia, I told you a dozen times, why aren't you opening your email? Go through it and you will find the draft. It was the fourth time she called me in the past 20 minutes to ask the simplest thing. Whenever I talked to her, I always wondered why in the world he hired her as a secretary if I had to do most of her work. Why not just double my pay and let me handle it officially? It was way past my work time, and I was not only tired but frustrated as well. Who wouldn't be when they feel as underpaid as I was feeling then? I walked to the bus stop and waited for my bus to arrive, which took about 15 minutes. After boarding the bus, I went to sit in an empty window seat, and the moment I did, my phone started ringing. My sleep-deprived mind made me curse a little louder when I saw Portia's name on the screen, making the lady sitting in my front seat turn around and give me a weird look. After declining it and turning my phone off, I leaned on the seat. Trust me, the back of my head was throbbing. I was this close to handing in my resignation letter if I had to explain to her the way to find the draft one more time. I was so tired that I didn't even realize when I dozed off. As I jolted from my sleep, I turned around, groaning, to see a frustrated woman scolding her child for kicking the back of my seat. To my surprise, only 3 other passengers were on the bus besides the misbehaving child. This was unusual, as the bus was typically packed with commuters when I usually disembarked. Then I realized I had not simply missed my stop, but had unknowingly traveled several stops past it. I got off at the next stop to board a bus back to my place, only to discover that the vicinity was far more remote than I had initially anticipated. While waiting for my bus, I noticed a man approaching my direction leisurely, donning a trench coat. To take precautionary measures, I hastened to pull out my phone, switched it on, and placed 911 on speed dial in case the situation called for it. He strolled over to the corner of the stop, extracted his cell phone, and proceeded to peruse it. Given the late hour and the fact that we were in such a secluded area, I was gripped with fear and prayed for the bus to arrive soon. After about 10 minutes, I felt slightly at ease when he remained focused on his cell phone. However, my relief was short-lived as I saw another man approaching the bus stop. He was walking in an odd manner, which led me to assume that he might be drunk. As he drew closer, he stood right next to me, causing me to feel uneasy. I immediately distanced myself from him. It was at that moment that I became fully aware of my surroundings. I was standing in the middle of the bus stop with two men on either side. This realization made me feel even more scared than I already was. To calm myself, I kept checking the time to see how long it would take until the bus arrived. Unfortunately, it seemed like there were still a few minutes left, which only added to my worry. Suddenly, I sensed an intense gaze directed toward me, and it became evident that it was coming from the intoxicated man. I attempted to avoid eye contact, but could sense him moving closer. Despite my efforts, I could feel his grin fixed on me. I rechecked the time, but I felt his nose brushing against my hair before I could react. The sensation sent a shiver down my spine as he sniffed me. I hastily distanced myself from him, only to be pushed closer towards the other man. Overwhelmed, I felt a lump form in my throat as I addressed the drunken man. "Can you please stop this?" However, rather than ceasing, he leaned in closer with a disgusting grin on me. I was ready to dial 911 when I found a hand behind me reaching the man's throat. I turned as I realized it was from the man in the trench coat. He had a pissed expression on his face as he threw a punch to the drunk man's jaw. I heard him say, "How dare you?" along with something else I couldn't understand as he continued beating the living hell out of him for several minutes before leaving him unconscious. The bus arrived shortly afterward, and we both got in. He didn't say anything to me or even look in my direction as he headed to an empty seat at the back of the bus and resumed whatever he was doing on his phone. As for myself, I opted to sit in a seat closer to the front. Though I couldn't shake off the fear and discomfort that had come with my alarming experience, I still felt a sense of security in his presence. 15 minutes later, I finally reached my destination and hastened towards my apartment complex, all while keeping an eye out for any potential threats. Fortunately, I made it back unscathed. As for my daily routine, I continued with it as usual, but with the added precaution of never dozing off in public transportation again. Though I never encountered the man in the trench coat again, I remain grateful for his help that day. There are people like that creepy man I encountered at the bus stop that makes you feel scared, unsafe, and skeptical towards others when you find yourself in a similar situation. And then there are people like the guy who helped me, who instills a sense of hope and restores your faith in humanity.
Last night, my boyfriend and I were driving home from Universal Studios in Orlando. We were rerouted a way home we've never went before, and we're traveling in basically the middle of nowhere. My boyfriend's speedometer is broken in his car, and he has to press the button to reset the miles after he gets gas, and this will be very important soon. We were driving on a deserted road in the middle of absolute nowhere with not one car in sight. My boyfriend realized we hit the 130-mile mark on his odometer. We needed gas, but there was literally not one gas station in sight. I put search gas stations nearby, and we found one. It turned out to be closed. In a hurry, we found another gas station 5 minutes up the road, and this is where the story gets weird. My boyfriend thought that he closed his gas cap, and we were once again driving along this deserted road. We heard a loud bang, and he realized he forgot to put the gas cap back on, so we were driving around this dark road looking for the gas cap. He finally pulls over and realized somehow the gas cap is still attached to the car. We get back on track to the other gas station. Out of nowhere, I had this horrible thought about something going wrong at that gas station. I pushed it aside because I knew we needed gas, and AAA is not an option where we were at the moment. We get to this gas station, the lights are kind of on. This road literally leads to a dead end, and with a gas station on it, the only way to leave this area was to turn left or go straight out of the gas station. My boyfriend got out of the car to see if we could get gas, and the feeling intensified. I have literally never felt like that in my life. My stomach dropping into my butt. I've been in very disturbing situations, such as almost being kidnapped twice, being followed home, watching someone being taken away in a body bag after being hit by a car, and even a paranormal situation. I can talk about these sometime in the future, but I had never felt like this before. I saw a white car pulling up the road to make a left. Keep in mind there is literally no one on this road. He pulls up and notices my boyfriend, and backs up with his windows down. I found this very strange because my boyfriend has a very nice sports car, and my mind immediately went into panic mode. I started screaming his name, and the man realized that someone else was in the car, myself, and turned left and sped off. Sadly, I didn't get his license plate because of how dark it was. This situation frightened me more than you can even imagine. It may not seem too scary, but it was easily one of the most terrifying things to watch because I didn't know if I was going to witness my boyfriend being robbed at gunpoint or something like that. The feeling and thought I had just 10 minutes earlier is what also made the situation even worse. I found a gas station with actual human life around, and we made it home safe and sound. Once I got home, my dad told me that the road we were driving on was famous for the many bodies being found on it. I hope no one ever gets put into the situation, and to the man who was planning to do something to my boyfriend, let's hope you never get away with it. This story happened when I was 15. It's been almost an entire decade now, but I still think about it quite a lot. This is our situation. My brothers and I live with my mom. I'm the oldest of 3, and my mom generally leaned on me to get things done. This naturally turned me into an adult from a very early age. Even to this day, my mom talks about feeling guilty for having to thrust adulthood on me so early on. She thinks that I didn't have a childhood, and maybe she's right. As you might imagine, my dad wasn't really in the picture. He was an abusive drunk, and when I say abusive, I mean seriously abusive. Up until the time I was 10, he lived with us, and whenever he would get drunk, he would beat the life out of us. It was always terrifying. The only saving grace was the fact that he wasn't always drunk or had alcohol in the house. In fact, there were sometimes, months at a time, when he would go without drinking, and he was an otherwise pretty decent person. For all that was wrong with my dad, he would have probably been close to an ideal human being if he had not been for his rampant alcoholism and the demon inside of him that came out when he got drunk. The incident that got my mom to finally divorce him was horrendous. I had been in my room playing video games or something, and he was in the living room. My mom just got home from getting the groceries. He accused her of having an affair at the time, and of course, this wasn't true, but he didn't believe it. He kept screaming at her that she was lying. It escalated to the point that he pinned her down on the floor and said that he saw her nose growing, and then grabbed a screwdriver and cut into my mom's nose with it. There's still a scar from that day. Well, that all went down when I was about 10. So this is about 5 years later. My mom was bringing my 2 younger brothers on some kind of Boy Scout trip. They were both in the Boy Scouts and always felt left out because all the other kids had a dad. My mom's guilt drove her to volunteer and help out whenever she could, so she went with my 2 brothers for this weekend camping trip with the Boy Scouts. She really wanted me to go with them because she felt uncomfortable having me alone in the house. I insisted that I was mature enough to do it, and honestly, I didn't even have friends that I could party with if I wanted to. She eventually gave in and let me have my way. I remember being in my bedroom, playing with my PlayStation. It was a pretty typical Saturday afternoon, but then I heard a car pull up. I didn't know who it was at first, and I immediately got really panicked that I was going to have to call the cops. My bedroom window doesn't have a really good view at the driveway, so it took me a second, but after studying the part of the car that I could see, I recognized that it was my father's car. I was immediately mortified. I was on bad terms with him, and my mom had a really serious restraining order put on him after they had separated. I got really nervous, and I was not sure what I should even do. He didn't come into the house for a few minutes, and I immediately started wondering what he was up to. I did the only thing that I could think of and cracked my window so I could hear what was going on outside. I thought that if I could hear what he was doing, I would have a better idea. I immediately recognized that he was crying. His whimpering sound was really intense. I hadn't heard from him in years, and my mom said that we would never see him again. But here he was, crying in our driveway. He paced around for a few minutes before finally standing still. I could hear his crying getting louder. Then he screamed. All I heard was a gunshot. The second I heard the gunshot, I immediately knew what had happened. I ran outside. I looked down at my father's lifeless body on the driveway cement. Blood everywhere. As traumatic as it may have been, I didn't cry. I didn't act emotional or anything. I just called the police. They got there a few minutes later and took me into custody. They wanted to keep me safe and secure until they could contact my mom. The rest of the story played out exactly as you would imagine. My mom apologized profusely. I had to answer some questions to the police. Nothing out of the ordinary. I don't really know what to make of the situation. I don't have much sympathy for the guy, and part of me is kind of happy that he did it. But looking back, I just kind of wish that he had done it where I wouldn't have had to have witnessed it. The entire experience made me never want to go stay home by myself ever again. It's been a long time since this whole thing had gone down, and even now, if I have to stay home by myself, I will make an effort to leave the house or to invite a friend over. I won't stay there alone. A couple of years have passed since this entire situation, and I can't help but to think that it was all for the better. My dad was a seriously destructive human being, and I know this might sound terrible, but I just wish that he had done it sooner. For those out there that haven't lived with a toxic and negative parental figure, consider yourself extremely lucky. The tribulations that I had to endure at the hands of my father fostered a lot of rage inside of me.
You would always find this one person who never smokes, drinks, or engages in any other unhealthy activity that could potentially compromise their well-being. Whenever they witness others indulging in such behaviors, they launch into lengthy lectures on the subject matter. I'm him, the one who preaches against these things. But I never realized that this habit could one day lead me to danger until I experienced it. On a Saturday evening, after a disastrous blind date that ended due to personality conflicts, I waited for the bus at the stop. Suddenly, my phone rang, and I saw it was my cousin Manny on the line. I picked up the call, and he asked if I would attend Peter's daughter's quinceañera. When I asked when it was, since I had forgotten all about it, he told me it was taking place the next day. I replied that I wasn't sure I could make it since I had a job interview scheduled that day, which was a lie, and he knew it too. However, the truth was that I didn't want to go because I was not too fond of such parties with drinking and wild behavior. Come on, man, Peter will incessantly pester me if I don't attend, and I don't want to go without you, he pleaded. Fine, I'll try. Now don't force me anymore, I said before disconnecting the call. While I was patiently awaiting the bus's arrival, a group of somewhat uneasy teenagers arrived at the bus stop. Their behavior was quite peculiar, as they spoke loudly and laughed in an almost manic manner while constantly fidgeting about. To my surprise, one of the teenagers extracted a glass tube from their pocket and inhaled what appeared to be crack smoke. I have never been one to lecture strangers on how to live their lives, so I'm not quite sure why I felt the urge to educate those young individuals on the dangers of smoking. Hey, you guys are still in high school, right? What are you doing smoking at your age? The once boisterous environment immediately quieted when I uttered those words, and all eyes turned towards me. Mind your business, old man, one of the girls in the group said, attempting to establish dominance with her tone. Although it didn't work. Her appearance stood out the most. bleached hair with a sharp fringe, adorned with numerous tattoos, and a piercing in her nasal septum, embodying the quintessential tomboy persona. I'm just saying this because it harms your health, kids. I should have stayed silent, but I couldn't control my tongue. One of the guys, a towering figure adorned with tattoos, fixed me with a menacing glare and snarled, "You got a problem, Grandpa? Want to step outside?" As he started getting closer to my chest, making me step behind. Not really, Before I could finish my sentence, he pushed me so hard that I couldn't balance myself and fell on my butt. They all started laughing in sync when the guy grabbed me by the collar and forced me up. I understood what he was doing. He wanted me to fight him back, but I didn't want to fight, and to be honest, I was starting to get scared. "Relax, dude. Do what you want, okay? My bus is here," I said, pointing at the bus, and started walking away. The guy suddenly grabbed my collar again and yanked me back, saying, "Not so fast." The rest of the group began encouraging him to strike me to set an example and discourage anyone from interfering with them in the future. I couldn't understand why they were being so aggressive. It wasn't like I was rude. My tone was super polite, and I only warned them about the harm smoking can cause to one's body. I grew increasingly frightened as I pleaded with them to release me, explaining that I meant no harm. However, they were too under the influence of whatever they smoked to listen to reason. Suddenly, a punch landed on my jaw out of nowhere. Holding my face, I turned to see it was the tomboy girl who had hit me and was giggling now. I wanted to beat the shit out of these people, but these kids were scarier. Some were even holding baseball bats, and I realized I mixed myself with many junkies who probably wouldn't hesitate to murder me in broad daylight. I was about to get another hit, but I twisted the guy's arms and somehow pulled myself away from them before making a run for it. I thought they would stop, but they started running after me instead. I never knew I could ever be scared of a bunch of teenagers, but here I was getting chased by them. I noticed a Walmart store and immediately rushed inside, hoping they wouldn't find me. They did come inside, looked here and there for a few minutes, and then left. There was no way I would return to the bus stop to encounter and get beaten by those deranged kids, so I called myself a cab. But as I exited the Walmart, I found those kids lurking around just across the street. I tried not to look noticeable as I walked to the cab, and luckily I successfully managed to get in. Even though I would never tell this to anyone, it was a terrifying experience. My heart was still racing as fast as a racehorse, and I couldn't believe what happened to me. One thing was sure, I would never say not to do anything to anyone again, especially not teenagers. They can be terrifying these days. After getting home, I called my cousin and told him I would go to the party, which made him happy. It's been quite some time since that incident, and I never shared this experience with anyone until now. However, I never blamed those kids for being like that, for their behavior was all the result of neglect and bad parenting, which has become common in today's generation.